Who came to Canada and why? 1900 till today. Wars and political instability in other countries brought many immigrants to Canada in the 1900s. Many people living in the midst of violence and uncertainty wanted to escape to a safer place. Other people came looking for work. World Wars. From 1914 to 1918, many countries were at war. This war was later called World War I. After World War I, some European country borders were redrawn and empires collapsed. Many people decided to leave Europe. Immigrants from countries such as Britain and Russia chose Canada. By 1939, Europe was facing another large-scale war. During World War II, 1939 to 1945, countries around the world, including Canada, fought Germany's leader Adolf Hitler. Hitler invaded countries and imprisoned and killed Jewish people. After the war, 250,000 Jewish people in Europe needed homes, but Canada allowed only 8,000 to immigrate here. Between 1945 and 1952, 800,000 other Europeans immigrated to Canada. Most immigrants came from countries such as Britain, Poland, the Netherlands, Greece, and Italy. They settled in larger cities such as Halifax, Montreal, and Toronto to find work. Some of the only people who came to Canada during World War II were British guest children or evacuee children. These children came to live with host families because Britain was unsafe during the war. In this photo from 1941, British children are boarding a ship headed for Canada. How do you think these children felt about leaving their homes? Faith in action. Students at St. Dominic Catholic Elementary School in Oakville, Ontario, worked with the town of Oakville to create the Bronte Veterans Garden. This garden honors Canadian soldiers and the sacrifices they made for the common good. Did you know? In 1916, during World War I, the town of Berlin, Ontario, changed its name to Kitchener. Berlin is a city in Germany, one of the countries that Canada was fighting. Thinking about continuity and change. By 2014, nearly 10 million Syrians had fled their homes because of the Civil War. The Canadian government planned to allow 1,300 of these refugees to resettle in Canada. Compare this to the government actions in the past. Political unrest. In the 1950s and 1960s, many countries in Europe were facing political unrest or shifting political beliefs. This caused people to flee their countries. For example, the Hungarian Revolution in 1956 forced out many Hungarians. After a failed uprising against the government, nearly 40,000 Hungarians came to Canada. Before World War II, Hungarian immigrants had settled on Canada's prairies. However, in the 1950s and 60s, Hungarian refugees moved to Toronto and Montreal. Catholic connection. In the 1970s, many Canadian Catholic dioceses signed agreements with the federal government that allowed them to sponsor refugees from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Catholic parishes sponsored thousands of these families. Some political refugees to Canada statistics. Between 1968 and 1969, what is now the Czech Republic and Slovakia, 12,000 came to Canada. In 1974, the country of origin, Chile, 7,000 Chileans came to Canada as refugees. In the 1970s, 7,000 Ugandans came to Canada. In the 1990s, 5,000 people fled to Canada as refugees from Kosovo. Fleeing war. Canada received a wave of immigrants from Asia in the late 1970s. After a long war in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, new governments took over in 1975. Many people had to leave their countries because they disagreed with the new governments. From these countries, 70,000 people came to Canada, some making dangerous journeys by boat. Refugees from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos who arrived by boat in Vancouver, BC, tended to settle there. As well, the United States fought in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. At the time, American men could be drafted or ordered to join the U.S. military, even against their will. Historians estimate that 50,000 to 125,000 Americans who did not want to fight in these wars moved to Canada in the 1960s. A Vietnamese family arrives in Canada in 1978. Many people fled Vietnam by any means possible. People would crowd onto fishing boats and cargo ships to escape.